Good afternoon. I'm Marcus Pask from Spain, and welcome to Talent Unplugged Across the Pond, the show where we dive into the honest, often messy truth about hiring.
Good morning. I'm Megan Conlon from Houston, Texas. And this is the show coming to you from two continents, two perspectives, one unfiltered conversation about how we look at the recruiting industry. Marcus, do we have an episode today?
Yeah.
We have our very first guest on the podcast today, and it happens to be someone very near and dear to both of us. I think you'd agree.
For sure. 100%.
Like, as in somebody who has been instrumental in helping build a recruiting career, continues to be a friend and a mentor, I think, to both of us. So we're so pleased and so honored that she agreed to join us today as our first guest.
I don't think she had a choice. That was it. It was...
But listeners, please welcome Sierra Hedderich to the podcast today. Let me give a quick intro on her. Sierra started her recruiting career as a sourcer at Box and was promoted over the course of 5 years to a manager of recruiting. Then she made the move over to leading business recruiting and eventually the whole recruiting function at Miro. And she hired both Marcus and I, maybe questionable hiring decisions, but she did hire both of us in our respective regions, Europe and the US. She was also eventually promoted to chief of staff to the CPO at Miro before she took a bet on herself and built her own consulting and fractional talent agency called COSA Talent Partners. And we're so glad you're here today. Welcome, Sierra.
Thank you. What an introduction. Appreciate you having me here.
We're pumped.
We are pumped.
Yeah. We went through our guest list of who we wanted to have on, and we both said your name at the very beginning. That was our number one person to bring on board. So we are super excited you agreed to join
happy
us.
to help. You're lucky I chat with both of you regularly, so it wasn't
Can't get rid of us. That's the problem.
Love it.
Super nice. So Sierra, tell us a bit about yourself that we've missed maybe as well. Like, we gave a little bit of an intro as to, your career history, but tell us a bit about you, and also what is COSA Talent Partners? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I mean, Meg, you did a great job of running through the resume and the highlight reel of my background. I am calling from California, so we're representing the Pacific over here. But I would say, yeah, for COSA Talent Partners, really it's a fractional head of talent business. So supporting a variety of different growth stage companies. I think one of the biggest learnings I had from Miro is that when I first joined, we were 200 people. And when I left, we were about 1,800, very different companies. And I really loved the earlier growth stage. So getting to build, be a bit more hands-on, that kind of early growth trajectory. And so when I started COSA, that's been a little bit more of the focus, is helping companies earlier on in the growth stage. So Series A, B, maybe C, depending on the size and stage, but have worked with a variety of different companies to build out their recruiting, either teams, best practices, trainings, employment brand, ATS implementations, kind of whatever is needed across the board at earlier growth stage companies.
What does Series A, Series B, Series C, what's any of this stuff mean to anyone that's not part of that world?
Yes, good question. So those are basically stages of growth that a company will go through. Previously, you would raise seed fundraising rounds. That's your initial check that allows you to employ people and pay them. And as the company grows and you get more revenue, you tend to get more investment, and it follows, an alphabetic scale. So you raise your Series A, gives you a little bit more funding. B, C, I think it can go basically all the way through F, G, H, until a company decides to hopefully eventually go public or has some sort of acquisition. So you can think about ABC as earlier on in a company's growth curve. It typically used to be correlated with number of employees, but I would say with AI, it just doesn't work that way. So yeah, Series A and B can be anywhere from 10 people to, a couple hundred now. So it's a pretty wide range, but I would say sub 1,000 employees is typically where most companies need support and kind of building out the foundations of what recruiting looks like.
Yeah. And I bet with each of those stages comes unique challenges for your customers, depending on how many employees that they have, what processes are in place. What have you found to be a unique challenge that maybe you weren't expecting as a consultant?
Ooh, good question. I mean, I think that the focus for each company is a little bit different. Are they focused on scale? Are they focused on quality? Do they want to revamp their systems? Like everybody's at a bit of a unique growth curve. And also, what do they care about? What do they want to prioritize? Do they want to keep things the same way they exactly are and just have more resources? And so the question mark and the challenge becomes of how do you get really quickly up to speed on what are the top priorities for every company, and know where to add value quickly. So ideally, you have those conversations before you join so you know what you're getting into, but sometimes you figure it out as you go. And once you get there, you learn and adjust.
Is it what you expected it to be? You were in Miro, you went through the hyper growth, you're at Box, which went through growth, and then you kind of fend for yourself and go into these other companies. Is it what you expected it to be like? Is it completely different?
Yeah, I would say a little bit of both. I think in some ways, I really love the variety. Having multiple clients at a time, you get to work on very different things. No 2 days are the same, and really, really like the sort of accelerated rate of learning. So you just get exposure to so many different types of companies, leadership teams, styles. I mean, my career, I spent 9 years between two companies. While that's a great run, you really don't get to know a ton of different ways of doing things. So I think that was what I expected, is knowing that there's just a bunch of different ways you can get recruiting done. But I would say that I was really surprised about maybe two things. One is that some of the basics that, like, I'm sure the three of us think are basics recruiting fundamentals are like mind blowing for some people who just don't have a recruiting background. So talking about competencies and designing an interview plan based on those
Yeah.
competencies, they're like, wow, this is amazing. And you're like, this is like 101. So
Yeah.
that was surprising, that I think even sharing a little bit of knowledge and value can go a long way. And then the second was more personally, like I really missed having a team. Or do miss having a team, and being a one-woman show is amazing. You have awesome flexibility and autonomy to work on the things you want, but there's not a ton of like, let's bounce ideas off of each other.
Yeah.
I want to spy someone, or hey, let's all work together on this problem. There's a bit of that as you get integrated into a company, but still not quite the same as being in-house.
Yeah. What does fractional talent leader actually mean? And is that different than being interim? Are the terms interchangeable? I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, they are, I would say, interchangeable more broadly. If you're talking to like the fractional and advisor community, there's very detailed differences between them.
Oh, really?
More broadly, when you're, chatting with a company about what they're looking for, oftentimes they're looking for like a contractor or a fractional leader. Typically, fractional leader is like, I think the easiest example is like a CFO, chief finance officer. Oftentimes, you're a smaller company. You don't really need a CFO, but you do need people to close your books, to maybe talk to investors, to do the role of like a head of finance or a chief finance officer, but you don't need someone full time. So you hire a fractional CFO.
I
So
gotcha.
similarly is head of talent, fractional head of talent. You're maybe a couple different recruiters, you have a few people on the team. Head of talent's not really a full-time job, or maybe it's like, hey, we want someone who's also recruiting, but then also doing strategic work. You could go as someone who's a fractional head of talent. So it's not typically full-time. So it'll be, 20 hours a week, 30 hours, 10 hours. It could be any
Yeah.
version of that. But you are fully embedded in the team. So I would say that oftentimes people use consultant also interchangeably. I think of a consultant as someone who's not typically embedded in a team. They're more of like advising from the outside of, hey, you come to me with a problem. I'll help walk you through it. I'll give some advice. They go off and, decide to take it or not. But a fractional is actually in there, embedded in the team, getting their hands dirty, building things themselves. There's so many different versions of how you can engage with a company in a non-full-time capacity. I have learned a lot about it. I definitely did not know going into this that there are so many flavors. But the nice part is that there's a lot of appetite for these different versions to sort of be able to engage, whether it's contract, hey, I want to be here full-time, but only 3 months, or I want to be fractional and come in and actually lead a team, or consultant. I want to advise from afar. So there's a little bit more flexibility, I think, to owning your own business and becoming a talent leader, whether it's fractional or not.
Got it. So essentially, it's the scope of the role determines the term that you use.
Yes.
How many clients are you generally working with at one time?
It's a good question. I would say 3 is too many, is what I learned. I would say 2 is the sweet spot. 3 is very possible. Depends, I think, a lot on the size of the engagement. Going back to your sort of previous question of what is the scope. If it's a couple hours here and there with a client, you can obviously do a handful of those. But if they're larger engagements, let's say 10, 15, 20 hours, you obviously only have so much time in the day. And there is a lot of context switching too. So being
Yeah.
able to actually absorb, what are the nuances of this company? Who are all of the players? What is the recruiting team structure here? And then an hour later, go to another company with a completely different structure and a completely different team. Last year around this time, I had 3 clients and it was a lot. It was sort of a crash course. I do think I would do it again, but I would make sure that there was sort of certain conditions that were met. Like I had the right resourcing and bandwidth, the type of engagements made sense. So to answer your question, I would say it depends. But for me personally, the type of engagements I like, I would say 2 is the sweet spot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This next question is actually for both of you. And I know that you're in different spaces with your agencies and with your consulting, but you both have done what I would probably not be brave enough to do, which is leave a full-time in-house role with a set salary that you could plan on and bet on yourself and go and build your own business. How do you start?
I called Sierra.
No, I do think like talking to other people though is a great place to start, and seeing, what mistakes did you make? What mistakes should I avoid? Like how to think about this, how to structure it. I think actually, we laugh, but Mark is totally spot on of like going in eyes wide open of what you're getting yourself into is definitely a good place to start. I also think like figuring out how you want to structure it, right? Is this going to be hourly? And then you need to figure out how many hours you need in order to pay your basic bills or to get by, or is it monthly? And some of that you figure out as you go. But I would say like, one thing I maybe wouldn't recommend, although you can totally do it, is like quitting and then being like, what should I do next? Maybe I'll start this.
Yeah.
I would think about it and start maybe planting some seeds a little bit beforehand. But honestly, people have done it both ways and are perfectly successful. It's just about risk tolerance. That my thought. But curious, Marcus, what was your experience with that?
Yeah, no, I messaged Sierra. I was like, hey, can I find out? And you gave me some advice. You said to me, you've had like 3 websites that you built or 3 versions of a website. And then you kind of realize that also when you're going live, that first website is fine. Just get it built and get it live because actually, yes, it's going to bring in some business, but you just need somewhere to store information and for people to know that it's a professional setup and all those things. And I spent months building a website that now I completely want to redo, but I know that it's probably not best served for my time. Similar to what Sierra's saying, I think there's a piece where you really need to figure out what it is that you enjoy doing as well. And for me, when I was setting up my company, I wanted to help people find a new job. And that was where I was gaining a passion from. I still enjoyed that side of recruitment. And I saw in the market that people were really struggling to find a job and I could offer them advice. What I didn't want to do was be a kind of recruiter hiring engineers for a company because I'd kind of lost that passion and that wasn't something that I then wanted to go and focus on. Instead, I wanted to expand onto stuff that I really enjoy. But you also know, as Sierra alluded to, you need to bring in money, like you need to pay your bills. And so you do need to take on some parts of a role or a job that you're not particularly keen on doing, or potentially work with customers or clients that wouldn't be your first choice, but you know that it's going to get you through those first few months. So you just need to make some decisions that are going to benefit you as a company, but also know it's tough. There is definitely weeks and months where I just wondered, what am I doing and whether I'm going to have an income at the end of the month and whether I'm doing the right thing. And it's scary, but once you start to get more known and your branding gets better and people start to work with you, you realize actually there is a business there. Well, I hope there is. I'm only 6 months in, so I hope there's still a business for me in 6 months' time. But there is a business there and there is an opportunity to help people as well.
Yeah, I think I'd be curious, Marcus, for you, but my first sort of customers and folks or clients, I guess, that I started working with were all referrals and network based.
Yeah.
It was like cold reach out. Hey, I found your cool website you spent a lot of time on. It's like, you're chatting with someone, you're catching up, it's a coffee chat, and then that's how you get introduced. So spending a lot of time and energy on your network, I think at the start is very important. And then to Marcus's point, then build some of the collateral that you can send to them that they can send to their network so it looks more official. It sort of is like, order of operations. Connect with your network first and then figure out, okay, how do I want to sort of set this up going forward?
Yeah, the referrals for me were key. Like those first few months, a lot of the people I was working with were contacts that I'd been in contact with for 10, 15 years on LinkedIn that maybe I hadn't spoken to, but suddenly they saw me posting more about what I could offer. And then someone else would share it. And then I had a message from someone that I hired 12 years ago saying, hey, I saw you're doing this. I would love some help. And I'm like, didn't know where it was going to come from, but those referrals and just branding was super important for me in those early stages.
How do you balance the difference between getting your name out there and having some sort of brand to present a value behind and just jumping in and saying, oh, I'm going to reach out to my network. I COSA Talent Partners. I don't even have a title for it yet, but I'm Sierra Hedderich and this is my new business. Like what I fear for me, I would have like a perfection decision paralysis where maybe similar to Marcus, I would need the brand to be pristine before I presented it to the world. And what I'm hearing from you is it can't be. It has to be something that you iterate on. You just have to understand the value that you're going to provide and then jump at it. How do you balance that when you're starting out?
For me, it kind of answers the question. I just had to be genuine to what I felt like I wanted my message to be. And that would attract the right people to come and work with me or ask for my help. And what I mean by this is I saw someone that I previously worked with almost doing an identical thing to what I wanted to do. And their messaging, their branding that they put on LinkedIn and other things, I was reading it. I was like, oh, this is really great for them. That's not me. And actually, I wanted to figure out what my voice is, my branding, and put it out there, but also start off quite simple with, I'm a job search coach. Hey, here's some CV advice that I can offer you for free on my network. And what do you think about it? Or this is what I think is happening right now in the market. And you just build up on your expertise, which is the basis of it. And then from there, build up even more on actually doing some webinars that I did. And then I asked Megan if we should do a podcast together. And then it's like these things just evolve from I'm going to put my first message out on LinkedIn to webinar to podcast. Like this is just an evolution of what is it I want to do and what is my branding and what is it that I feel comfortable doing and making sure that there is an audience for it. I hope that alludes to the answer.
Yeah.
I think so. Sierra?
Yeah, no, I would say very similarly that it's an evolution. I got some great advice again from like networking, chatting with folks before, but one piece of advice was thinking about as you sort of create your brand, your company, do you want the company to be the face or do you want to be the face? So like, are you the brand? Or is your company the brand? And for me, I was like, I actually don't really know the answer to that. And I kind of had to figure out which was which. I think organically, it just so happened that it was me because I was having conversations with people. I wasn't going really hard on the marketing campaigns, et cetera. It was more of informal one-on-one conversations with folks in my network or, hey, you should chat with so-and-so, and then having that conversations. When people would think about, a fractional talent leader, they would think about Sierra. They wouldn't think about COSA, right? And actually stopped putting time and energy into building the brand because it is now sort of like the umbrella at which, the back-end systems work, but it's not necessarily where people come to work with me. It's all through referrals. So to go back to your original question, Meg, is like, even if I had put a ton of time into it, that isn't actually what people are attracted to. They're attracted to you, your experience, who you are, the network that you have. And so I actually haven't even looked at my website probably in 6 months. So,
I haven't for a few months.
So I don't even know if it's like super relevant to kind of where I focus. But to Marcus's point, it's a great space to have as like a landing page for people to go look at. But for the most part, it's really all word of mouth and me being authentic to just like who I am and showing up. And if people want to work together, great. If not, maybe there's another way I can help them. I can connect them with somebody else who might be a better resource or, answer questions for them that might give them some value that they can take back.
It's funny, you were talking on your piece there. I actually had that very early on where someone gave me the same feedback and then I had to try and figure it out. And I realized in the first few calls that I had with potential clients that I was the brand or I was the person they were coming after answered, because when you would then talk about pricing, you would talk about those things. They're then making that decision based on you in front of them, not on this brand or name. It's who's in front of me and do I want to spend the money to work with that person and their expertise, not this shaping your path brand that I'm building, because it was non-existent. So yeah, it was a similar way of kind of thinking through it.
So valuable, especially to our listeners that are maybe thinking about taking the plunge or are in the very early planning of their business and launching something like that. So thank you both. That was very interesting. Before we get to myth busting, I'd like to move one roll back, Sierra, to your time at our global company, Miro, where we all met together. You had so many roles there, were promoted multiple times. I would be interested to hear what was the most rewarding part of being a global talent leader.
Very simple. The people and the team. Yeah, I think being able to sort of build a team that I think really supported the business. So like functionally, we were able to do our jobs and meet the needs of the business. I remember our CRO, Zhenya, at the very beginning when, I was first hired, didn't have like maybe the fondest relationship with recruiting and previously recruiters. But by the end, he was like, this is the best recruiting team I've ever worked with. And I think for me, I don't take that super personally. I just am like very proud of the team and kind of where we were able to support the business and how far we were able to go. So I would say from like a business need standpoint, that is one. And then the second is like really seeing the team grow and people develop relationships with each other, become really subject matter experts in their area and go on to lead teams, to be my backfill, to go lead, head of talent at other companies, just get great career opportunities afterwards. I always said that I wanted the team to be known as just really solid recruiters, whether that was at Miro or somewhere else. And I think seeing where people have landed and the types of opportunities they've gotten after, that is the most rewarding for me to sort of see where, everybody has grown and been able to go next.
Any advice for someone wanting to go down the path of being a TA leader?
I would love to hear what you guys have to say about that as well. So, I would be curious your answers. But I would say that the rewards are very different, right? It's not tangible. You're not going to be able to see the fruits of your labor every day, even every week. People aren't going to tell you you're doing a good job really ever, or like very often. It's very intangible. If you're a recruiter and you really love the thrill of closing and having the win and moving on to the next, and sort of seeing people in real time joining the company, like it's a very tangible reward system. Leading a team and leading people is very different. It's a lot of intangibles. It's a lot of, like quiet moments and, one-on-one conversations. So the sort of celebratory nature of it isn't the same as an IC recruiter. So some people glamorize it and think it's just the best, but it really isn't for everyone. It's a hard role, especially in, I would say this market, but all markets, to be honest, that just make it challenging. The business demands a lot of talent leaders now, which is a good thing, sort of moving away from, hey, we're just going to give you roles, go fill them, to now actually, really contributing to the broader system of the business and being a strategic partner. Mm-hmm. But it's not all glamorous like every role. So I would say you have to do it because you really love it. But yeah, I'm curious, Meg and Marcus, what would you say?
Yeah, you hit on a point that I was going to make, especially moving to MITRE as head of talent and being at a smaller company, is really embedding yourself in the company itself, getting to understand those org leaders, what the business outcomes need to be, think much higher level than just the transactional open rec, fill a rec, open rec, fill a rec. We have such a opportunity as talent acquisition leaders to position ourselves as business partners. If we get ourselves in the room, if we come with data, if we come with market insights, if we actually understand the business that we are operating in and serving, you can move yourself away from being more of an order taker if you are actually working as a strategic business partner, as you just said, Sierra. I think that's where I've gotten a lot of reward over time, in addition to the people leadership component. If you don't want to be a people leader, if you don't get reward out of celebrating others' wins, then this is probably not the right role for you, because it is very challenging. But I'd say that's that's the piece of advice I would say is position yourself strategically and know everything about the business as if you were an executive.
Yeah. And it's quite a lonely place. You touched on it, Sierra, like being a leader of a team can be quite lonely. As you said, it's not sometimes the most rewarding. And I think for anyone trying to make that shift across, I would see if you can do a sideways move, like just take on some projects, take on some extra work that gives you that exposure, first of all. I did it at Miro, went from go to market, then took on engineering in Armenia. I didn't know where Armenia was on the map at that point. I definitely do now. They do amazing wine. But I was like, let me give that stretch opportunity to go and learn engineering recruiting before I go and do the plunge elsewhere. And I think you then start to figure out what type of cultures of people you can work with, what teams, what size, what specialisms, and see if it's for you. Because as you alluded to, management is not for everyone. And I think it's glamorized a lot where it's this traditional path that you are a IC, then you're a senior IC, then you become a manager, then you become a leader. And it's not for everyone. And not every business should have a load of managers either. And I think that a lot of people should really just think about what is it about being a manager they want to do, and is it really what gives them a satisfaction, like you said, Sierra, rather than just being a transactional recruiter where you're hiring nonstop and speaking to candidates? Do you want to go and do all of the other side, which is performance reviews? It is dealing with, other things that you don't normally have to deal with. And it's a lot, but there's so much reward in it when you get to see people grow and develop and sometimes have those performance conversations where someone's getting a promotion. Like they're the big wins when you get to have those parts. And you hold on to that for another year because it's such a nice feeling to then get you through the next part. That would be my advice.
I think that I have cried in every promotion conversation Sierra ever gave to me. I'm a very emotional performance review receiver.
Well, it makes me feel better. I don't remember it that way at all. They were all very happy conversations in my mind. Marcus, I do remember we were sitting
at a wine bar.
The wine bar, yes.
Yeah.
When I came over. So some of the conversations are like very, very distinct memories, which are the fun ones that you get to have.
It was coming through my head when we were discussing promotion. I was like, yes, me and Sarah went to the wine bar, and it was your favorite wine bar in Amsterdam, and it was across the road from my house, which I've frequented quite a few times. But it was that moment, it was like, yeah, this is going to be what's happening next. I was like, great, this is an unbelievable way to tell someone, like having a glass of wine sat by the canals in Amsterdam. I was thrilled. It was great.
Yeah. And Meg, yours was while you were actually on maternity leave. I called you and said, hey, when you come back, you've got a big role waiting for you. Get ready.
That is right. That was daunting and exciting all at the same time. But
yeah, Meg, what's that like? You're on maternity leave, and historically, like we'll put out there because we do some myth busting and talk about honest stuff. Being on maternity leave can be a very scary place from what I can understand. And then you get this phone call from your manager saying you're going to come back to a higher position and everything. What was going through your mind? We all saw it on the cards because you were doing an amazing job in the background, but being off and then
Marcus.
did it feel like it was going to happen? Did it feel like it was going to be a challenge when you came back?
I think Sierra was positioning it to be that way when I returned. So it wasn't entirely a surprise. Was it daunting? Yes. And shout out to our working moms, working parents. It was quite the juggle. I'll be so honest, and maybe we'll do a whole episode on that. To have a newborn and to be working at a high growth startup in a leadership role, especially in a first line leadership role, I would say arguably the most difficult of the leadership roles is first line management. So I had been in a lead or a manager position previously, so I had a bit of a roadmap, so that wasn't quite as scary. If she had said, hey, you're going to be head of business recruiting when you return, that would have been very, very scary, to be honest. Fortunately, Sierra was such a supportive and wonderful manager and mentor at the time that my transition back from maternity leave was as smooth as could have possibly been. So I was very lucky in that regard. I know not every parent is lucky in that regard.
Yeah, it was wonderful to see that it happens. Like genuinely.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know women in the job market right now, particularly, are nervous about sharing pregnancies and taking time off because it may stunt their ability to get that promotion or see career growth. And that stigma is not gone. But shall we get into some myth busting for today?
Myth busting. Let's go.
I love it. Okay, cool. I'm really excited about this topic. I think it's going to be spicy. Every hire needs to be above the bar, quote unquote. And perhaps we start with what we mean by above the bar. I think there might be some folks that don't know what we mean by that in recruiting terms. I can share my definition of what we mean by above the bar. So essentially, it's that a candidate exceeds the minimum standards your company has set for that specific role, the skills, the values, the performance, trajectory, behaviors. So like our team would be better off if we hired this person, would be my definition of above the bar, based on a role rubric, ideally, that's already been pre-solidified before hiring has begun.
Sierra, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it means something different at every company is what I have learned. So I do think it's a great call out to sort of define what do we mean when we're talking about it here. I would say that there's probably two different ways that I sort of hear it the most. One is the bar is sort of like, set median, let's call it like the average of the team that meets, most of the competencies according to the rubric, etc. Some people also referred to the bar as like the top performer on the team, right? We want to continually be hiring better than best. So we're elevating the team constantly. Basically the caliber of talent is always increasing. And those mean, I think, two very different things when it comes to like tactically recruiting against it. So I think actually defining like where the bar is as well as what the bar is really, really important when you're figuring out how do we actually go hire against it.
And how can internal teams go about figuring out what their bar is?
There's a few ways. I mean, you can look at performance reviews can be a part of it, where you look at, you're doing it for your recruitment team and you look at the performance reviews and see how people are doing, and that maybe there is a skill set that is missing. Maybe there is a part of the experience that is missing within that team. Maybe there is something you're trying to plug in, and that can be you need a specialist on engineering hiring for a TA team. So you'll bring in a really strong engineering recruiter that is more higher experience than what you're currently seeing within that team. So you can look at it that way. You can be from just the companies that they've come from, the industries they've come from. Like a lot of startup scale-ups, they want to look for people that have been through it themselves, that have been through that pattern like we all have. And so they might look for someone that has actually understood how that growth has gone. And that will raise the bar because they've already experienced what those challenges are going to be before you actually get to them. And so that can actually really help develop the team. And it can be a variety of ways of you looking at the bar. I think the interesting part is also, and it's skipping it a little bit, it feels like it's only really started coming through in the last 5 or 6 years, this hiring bar raiser program. Everyone calls it something different. I don't feel like it was a thing 10 years ago. Maybe it was a little bit, but we didn't talk about it. Now, almost every company I speak to, every person is talking about, we need to have a better hiring bar, a bar raiser. We need to think about how we elevate. And you're going to hit a ceiling point sometimes where you just really can't go much higher than you already are. But it's a very interesting topic that I feel like evolved a lot in these last 4 or 5 years. Sierra, what would you look at?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It does feel like it's become more of a hot topic. I think there was a lot of hiring that was done without much regard to sort of quality. A lot of it was we need to hire these people, we need butts in seats. And we've especially seen, I think, a turn of that over the last couple of years where companies maybe haven't had as much budget to go hire at the same volume previously. And so there's been much more focus and prioritization on quality. So, okay, how do you operationalize quality? You figure out how do we raise the bar, whatever that means to a particular company, right? So I would echo everything you said, Marcus, around like looking at your current team. I think honestly, some very candid, honest conversations by managers and leadership around who is actually meeting expectations and who isn't. Asking yourself questions of, would you rehire this person again today? Or if you had a team of 5 and you could hire this person, would you clone them 5 times? Like, would that be a team you were excited about? And so, thinking about what is also the future direction of this team? Do we want to keep it the same profile, or is the company trying to change their strategic direction and we need to hire people who have done X, Y, and Z instead of A, B, C, whatever it might be? It's a very I would say dynamic conversation, depending on what's happening with the business. But I would echo a lot of the sentiments you said, things to look at. Going back to Meg's rubric, really defining what the bar actually looks like. What are the competencies that really make someone successful? And where do we need to make sure, or sort of the floor that we're making sure we definitely hit with each candidate?
Yeah, you both hit on something that I think is interesting to actually define, which is is there a difference between above the bar and bar raiser?
I think it depends who's part of this process and part of the loop and what everyone else in the whole company defines as a bar raiser for themselves or above the bar. And that's the complexity of this, is that, as Sierra kind of alluded to, every manager I've spoken to defines it in a different way, and the company does, and the process does, and there's no consistency that happens with it. I don't know how much difference there is, if I'm truthful, because I don't know that everyone is using the same terminology for us to then say which one is versus the other. And that's the problem.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think just hearing you say it, Meg, like there's sort of a simple way that I can think about it, but I don't know if it even holds true. So I'll say it and then we can pick it apart. But I think like above the bar implies that the bar is fixed, that it is a certain point in time, that is a certain set of competencies. But then you have a bar raiser, which is, well, this person is actually moving the bar with them, which implies that it's sort of the average, I don't know, quality maybe is the right word. I don't know what we want to use there, but like sort of the average competency or skill set of the team, they are raising it. So now the bar is higher for the next hire that we make. So I think one could be fixed, one could move. But again, to Marcus's point, like they're used pretty interchangeably at different ways at different companies. And so there isn't really one definition. It's a conversation with executives. And honestly, probably various different executives have different definitions within a company. So it's kind of getting everyone on the same page. Are we all talking about the same thing here?
Right.
Yeah. And are they assessing their internal team across the same criteria for that bar to be a certain level? So, you've got one manager that is assessing all of their team and saying, this is my bar of talent that I'm bringing in and what the current team is. And everyone that I have right now is above the bar. But then you're doing a cross-reference to another manager and they might have even higher standards or lower ideas of what that is. So across teams, across functions, across companies, that bar is changing so much because we all have biases at the end of the day. Like we're not going to remove this. So everyone is interpreting it in a completely different way each time. And that's difficult.
So back to our myth then. Does every hire have to be raising the bar?
No.
I don't think so. Marcus, go for it.
Because like when I was scaling up my recruitment team, like I would bring in some more junior talent. And would that be raising the bar of the overall team right away? No, they wouldn't be a bar raiser. But what they would be is someone that in the future could be really top talent. So you also look for people that are going to grow and going to develop, but they might have just the raw skills and experience or the right attitude for doing the role. And you can see that in them. But actually, if you look at their experience on paper versus someone internally in the team, no, they would not be a bar raiser. But what I see is potential in someone becoming an amazing person in the team. And that would then hopefully in the future have them performing at a bar that is really high for you to then think about. Like I kind of alluded to earlier, you don't always want to have bar raisers in the team. You do also want to have a core foundation of the team. And there's a lot of people, we've worked with them, that love the job that they do and do it to a very good level, but they want to come in, 9 to 5, do their job, go home. They don't necessarily want to be that person that is doing everything out of the ordinary. So for me, that's also super important to have. Sierra?
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Marcus. I mean, if we think about it tactically, right? What happens if you hire people above the bar every single time? Well, let's just use like a mid-level recruiter, for example. So you want to hire every recruiter to be sort of above the bar for a mid-level recruiter. Well, what happens is that you start hiring people who are actually a little bit closer to a senior recruiter. Because the bar is changing, right? Like you're hiring people here, they're above the bar. Okay, well, the bar's moved. Now you're hiring here. Okay, so the bar actually will bump up against the leveling framework if you continually hire above the bar, which means that you need to start paying them at a higher pay band, which means that now there's like a pay discrepancy between the old team and the new team. And now does the competencies for what a mid-level recruiter change? Because now over half the team, maybe 90% of the team is operating closer to a senior recruiter than they are mid-level. So I think it actually has longer term implications if every single hire is above the bar. and it changes the bar, I guess, or is adjusting where the bar is. I think if the bar is a fixed point in time and it's the mid-level, then you kind of still run into the same problem, but maybe it takes longer. I think the like framework that I think is actually more useful is Keith Rabos. He has this sort of philosophy called hiring barrels and ammunition. So basically, hiring people who are barrels, who are very like powerhouses, right? They're 10Xers in terms of their output. They're able to sort of have an idea, take it to, what is this actually going to look like when we operationalize it, and actually all the way to the finish line. Well, not everybody is, good at coming up with those ideas and actually has the resources to then go execute on them. That's where you need ammunition. So there needs to be a bit of a ratio between people who are 10Xers. They can really up-level your team. They have these great ideas, can navigate projects or processes from start to finish, but you also need people to go out and execute on that vision, that inspiration that comes. I do think having a dynamic team of both is probably the best place to be. It's just hard in this current market. No CEO wants to say, okay, we're going to hire someone who's like maybe below the bar or at the bar. Like that's not acceptable. And so it takes a little bit of massaging to actually figure out, how are we going to operationalize this? How do we want to make sure this actually turns into a recruiting strategy that's sustainable? Because it will slow down hiring significantly if we continue to hire above the bar.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I'm going to say it depends.
Mm.
And it depends for the exact reasons, Sierra, that you actually just mentioned. There are stages of a company where it is imperative that every hire is a 10Xer. For example, the founding engineering team. It's like under 20 engineers. It's really, really important that every engineer is phenomenal at what they do. Otherwise, your product is not going to get off the ground. You're not going to be able to continue to build the product roadmap or the feature requests that your customers, your initial customers are asking for, and you're sunk. Same with your G&A team, same with your sales team, same with your implementation team. Seeing it now currently is invaluable. The level of talent that we are assessing for and the amount of impact that they can have for us at a sub 100 person company. So that is the only time that I would say that every new hire for a certain timeline or a certain stage of company does need to be above the bar. I wouldn't say raising the bar, but I would say based on your rubric above the bar. Then after a certain threshold, and I don't know what company size that would be, it certainly doesn't matter the series. I think there's a certain employee count where it's important to have those layers. So at the bar is perfectly acceptable. You need to have somebody who's going to grow into the role, like an early careers would be like the first thing I think of. Like your incoming new grads for an SDR program are not going to be above the bar. They may have a high slope, which is really valuable for the long-term longevity of a company, but you don't need them all to be above the bar raising.
I actually agree with you. I think there's one other instance in which you do need to continually hire above the bar, which we're seeing right now, is if there's sort of like some sort of special team or a special project, right? You hear all about, Meta hiring for their new AI team, and they're poaching these open AI engineers for like $1 quadrillion or whatever it is. If you're trying to compete on a very particular area, and it's like, I don't want to say life or death for the company, but it's very, very critical or important. Then you probably do need to be placing a lot more emphasis on the right hires, and one person can really have a negative impact. So I think as long as the company has priorities that you can align a hiring strategy to, then you can figure out, okay, where do we need to put the time and energy? But if they're like every single hire needs to be above the bar, you're going to just slow down hiring pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that companies don't do enough investing in testing for their values, assuming they actually live them embedded in their ways of working. I think that there are a lot of companies that purport to have values and put them on their website, but then don't ever really intentionally interview for them, or the values interview is one interview in the interview process, but it's sort of the throwaway interview. Like if it went okay, that's all right. Like they were great at everything else, and then it ends up not being a fit in the long term. So I would say like invest in the values alignment. That is a culture killer, and that will crush your retention if the folks that you bring on board, especially early in a company, are not aligned to the values that you have.
I just love listening to you too. It's like I'm learning even now, years on, listening to you both going back and forth, and I've swayed my mind going from, yeah, it's true. Yeah, that's also true. It's incredible to watch. It's great. And this is why also, Sierra, we brought you to be our guest, because like your knowledge and expertise on this is truly valuable. Probably it for this episode. We have touched on a lot so far today. So lots that everyone can get to listen to. But that is it for this episode of Talent Unplugged Across the Pond. We want to thank you, our special guest, Sierra, for joining us today. And we hope you have enjoyed listening, and we look forward to more stories, some more myth busting, and everything in between. So it's a goodbye from me.
It's a goodbye from me.
Thanks for having me.